Hello guys, how's it going? It's Stefan. As you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be going over all of the work that I made second semester at RISD. It's a lot. Let's just get into it. To start off with drawing, I had Masha second semester, and a lot of the people in my class weren't very crazy about her. They thought she was very difficult, challenging. She was kind of very much of a strict teacher that kind of follows the RISD reputation. Personally, I really loved having her. She was one of my favorite teachers at RISD. I had a really easy teacher first semester, so it was kind of a nice change going into something a lot more harder and just kind of something that would really push yourself. I feel like in whatever practice you do, you are going to need to push yourself and you're going to need to kind of go to your limits and go into this zone where you're not very comfortable in order to kind of get better and grow as a person in whatever discipline you're doing. For me, that really was what Masha did for me. Everything of hers was very large, it was very time consuming, but you really kind of got a lot out of the class and a lot of kind of lessons that even if they're not necessarily correlated to drawing, you can kind of carry them into your discipline. The first assignment for her was a self-portrait that you had to kind of use unconventional materials in order to create this piece. Everything of hers, as I said, was really large, basically my size. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it was really huge. And just a tip, if you do kind of go to RISD or any art school and you do need to work really large, I personally just use smaller pieces of paper to kind of make one big piece. It ends up being a lot cheaper. Just a pro tip. We're all broke college students. I really wanted to be kind of unique or different with this piece, just push myself since it is the first piece that we're showing her. And so she really went over mark making the first class, and so I really wanted to think of mark making in a different way. And so for me, that was scratching into plexiglass and having that be kind of a big component of the piece. It ended up costing a lot to do plexiglass for the entire thing, and so I ended up just doing panels on certain parts, and it didn't really show up the way I really wanted it to. And so I kind of used makeup in the background and had that be kind of the main focal point, and then used the plexiglass in the front. That kind of was, I guess, the bad part of this piece. She wasn't necessarily crazy about this just because she felt that makeup was something very kind of obvious, not something unconventional, and I personally agree with that. Makeup is basically a drawing material. But her critiques, we really kind of only go over 3/4 of the class. She has the whole class kind of pick the first piece that we think is the best, and then that person picks the next person and the next person, and doing that we kind of go over 3/4 of the class, so not everyone kind of does get critiqued. Moving on to the second piece, she really kind of loved, on top of working large, just embodying kind of the energy of something, just kind of the atmosphere and the embodiment of something, not necessarily it being exactly what you see, but more so the feeling that you get from it. She felt that a drawing, if it resembled too closely what it actually was, there wouldn't really necessarily be a point in it. You could just take a photograph and achieve the same outcome. She really just wanted something very atmospheric, just very ethereal almost. So for the second piece, we had to go in a natural setting that kind of involved trees or some natural plants and incorporate that into the piece and be the focal point, but not necessarily focus on the actual trees, but more so of the energy and atmosphere of the place. Me and my friend Ava, we went to this greenhouse at Brown, and I am the biggest geek when it comes to plants. I used to have like a plant obsession. It was bad. It was such a good experience. We were just kind of there like alone with these giant pieces of paper that were taking up the entire place. The person who worked there could not get by. He was like jumping over our drawing boards, but it was just such a good experience, and I just felt at home with all of these plants. I was just kind of geeking out about this project. I really wanted to put a lot of time into it and a lot of energy and just make it the best that I could. I chose this setup that I thought made a good composition and kind of went from there. Her critique on it was that it was kind of too dark. She felt that a real black was really meant to be used sparingly, and that you're supposed to use kind of a lot of in-between shades, like going from white to black, but mostly being middle tones. I personally don't agree with that. I feel like to create an energy or embodiment of a place, you are allowed to kind of have the creative capability to kind of take that where you want. That's just my opinion. But this is this piece. And the next piece, there are some set guidelines that RISD kind of makes us go over. One of those is obviously perspective. And so for this piece, she wanted you to find a location that kind of involved perspective, but the twist on it was kind of that she wanted you to overlay two different perspectives. And so for me, I didn't necessarily want to just directly overlay them. I did the staircase where I was, for the bottom half, looking directly at the staircase, and then for the second like top part, I was like looking up at it, like up into the heavens. I am happy with this, but I feel like I could have put in a lot more work into it. I feel like this piece was the piece that I kind of put the least amount of energy in second semester, at least for drawing. And she kind of like brought that up in critique. There was kind of a lot of it wrong in terms of perspective. For the final critique, we were supposed to go back into all our drawings, and whatever she said about the pieces we were supposed to fix and make it better. And so I did kind of improve this piece a lot. I don't think I took a picture of that, but just for my mental health, it's there, it's better. So moving on, the next piece was really crazy. For the next piece, she wanted us to blindfold ourselves. That was an experience. She felt like in drawing what you're seeing, you're not necessarily observing it as much as you should be, but you're just, for example, like, oh, you know, let's say you're drawing a mug. You're drawing what you think a mug looks like instead of what you're actually seeing. And so by taking your sight away, you're kind of forced to actually feel the object and draw it for what it actually is. So we were told to blindfold ourselves. I have another video on that. I'll link it down below. It's very funny. Me, Ava, and Summer, we all blindfold ourselves in the same room. It was an experience. Honestly, this was very fun. I really enjoyed this. Weirdly enough, welcome to art school. After we were told to blindfold ourselves, we were supposed to go back into it and kind of make it look more like the space. I kind of liked the weird lines that I created, and so I did kind of try to keep that as part of the piece as much as possible, and very sparingly went back to edit it. And so moving forward to the following week, we were supposed to kind of go back into this piece, and we're supposed to erase the entire thing. She is very big on not necessarily caring about your work too much, and that was something that I learned, I think, the most from her this class, and I really appreciate learning this. But she really made it seem so that like you don't care so much about your work in terms of being scared to go for it and push it further, and just be very stuck with the thing that you have and be very make tiny lines. She did want you to be very expressive, very out there with your work, and so by erasing it, you don't necessarily care too much about it. It's a piece that you make, but it's not a part of you, if that makes any sense. So after we were told to erase all of it, we were supposed to create the space again. Here's the plot twist in 5 dimensions. To her, a dimension isn't necessarily something that is like, oh, everyone thinks that, oh, time is the 4th dimension, and that's not necessarily the case for her. She did want you to have the liberty to kind of think of it in whatever you want. She was literally like, the emotions of a banana can be a dimension. Again, welcome to art school. But for this, I think this was my favorite piece that I made in the class. I think I did stress levels, light, I think emotions, and movement. I forgot what the 5th one was, but that's the 4 that I remember. I really loved making this. I did get a really good critique on it. She ended up taking this piece for this art show that's gonna happen next fall, so I'm really happy with that. And her only critique on it was really that she kind of wanted each individual thing to kind of be incorporated more so into one another. She was very kind of interested, like what would happen where the light would kind of meet the stress levels, what would happen to those lines and the different mark making in them. I did go back and edit this too for the final, and yeah, I'm really happy with this piece. I love it. It's my baby. Okay, the next piece, holy shit, this piece, a soul, a part of me has left my body. It is no longer here. This piece was the death of me. It was the death of our entire class. It was our midterm. I died. For this, we had to create a 30-second animation, and I made an animation last semester for my final, and that was a 1-minute animation with a partner for a minute. And this was just a 30-second animation, but we just had 1 week to create it, and it was at 24 frames per second, so 24 times 30, that's a lot of drawings. This piece killed me. This piece killed the entire class. I mean, I'm just gonna play it here. I honestly have no words. I really loved my concept for this. I wanted to create kind of this piece where this person was kind of very melancholy and thinking back on past lives, on lives that they could have had, or maybe lives that they did have in the past. I don't think it's really kind of shown in the thing that I made, but that's because we were kind of supposed to make it into a 2-minute animation, and we did have the option later on to either do a 2-minute animation or a series for our final, and so I did choose to do the series because I felt like I would kind of learn a lot more through doing a series. But I just did want to embody this person who, like, thinking on their life and like people they could have been in the past, and just very nostalgic, very kind of dreamy almost, but very dark and seductive. That's all I have to say about this piece. We all stayed up the entire night. We all struggled together. It was an experience. Moving on to our final, I did make the series, and I really kind of loved the way it turned out and what I did with the series. I ended up doing smoke, and she was kind of scared in the direction it might go in because she felt like smoke was something that is kind of very cliche. It could go into that direction where it's a very known area. I did kind of want to more so create the embodiment of smoke than actual smoke. But so in creating these very kind of atmospheric pieces, I did kind of take a different approach on smoke. She really loved them. I created a mini series of just one line kind of representing the whole embodiment of smoke, and just kind of did as much with it as I could. I made very large pieces, very small pieces, just kind of a very broad range of what smoke could be and what kind of represents smoke. And I'm just very happy with this, and it was honestly a really great way to end the year and a great way to just have this final. I think I took up the entire room during final. I created so many pieces that for my critique it just had to, like, it took up the entire room. But anyways, I think next is design. And a lot of the teachers at RISD are very process oriented, very much so about process as opposed to a finished piece. And my design teacher in specific, he was very much so about process. The point of foundation year is to kind of learn and kind of develop your skills, not so much to create good finished pieces. That's kind of stressful if you're like trying to find internships and stuff and you don't necessarily have work you can put into a portfolio. But it does kind of create a mindset that you can then use in further years and apply what you learned into the pieces for the major that you're going into. Going off of this idea of process, the first assignment for him was to create 100 circles. And it sounds kind of crazy, it kind of was. He wanted to create a different process for each circle that you made. And so the idea was that the more that you make, the weirder and the crazier the process will get. So say for the first one, you just like drew a circle with a pencil. So you like make one with charcoal. You eventually run out of the very generic types of ways you can make a circle, and then you kind of go into really strange, weird territory and just, I don't know, like throw a pencil at a paper and it creates a hole and that's a circle. Or say you like stamp your butt with ink on a piece of paper and that's a circle. Been there, done that. I drew with my toe, that was interesting. But this is just kind of what the assignment was, and it was honestly crazy. It was kind of hard to think of new different ways to create circles, say by the last 30 or so, and by the last 10 you really were kind of struggling to kind of come up with really unique ways to do this. It was a very good exercise and a good way to kind of think of new processes. Moving forward to the next week, we were supposed to select one of them and create pieces just using that process and kind of really experiment with it. We were supposed to just really experiment and take this process further in as many directions as we can. And so that's kind of what I did with 1 typography and 2 photography. I was kind of overlaying different images to create one piece or one image, and I was also using typography to kind of do the same thing. And so I was kind of just experimenting with both of them simultaneously. This did kind of bring me into the following week, which was to create one finished piece using this process. Since I did kind of experiment with two processes, I thought it would be good to incorporate both of them into this piece. And so I did photograph my friend Ava and had that be kind of the photograph aspect, incorporating kind of different images into this, and then use type on top of that to kind of reinforce it. I'm not necessarily crazy about the type. I don't think it's necessarily working. That is what my teacher Clement said in the class that wasn't necessarily working about the piece. The moments that he did like were the ones where things weren't necessarily matching up correctly or perfectly. That did kind of happen more so in my test than in the final piece. And so he said that almost anxiety of things not matching up perfectly was kind of something really good to kind of incorporate into your piece, and something that I should kind of think about more so.